realize, I lost before I stepped up. Anybody ever been there? Or I've been trying to work on lots of just personal struggles. One of them, you guys know this, is patience. And so I want to be more patient. I don't want to be impatient all the time. And into this, I get on the road and I get behind two drivers on the interstate driving 65 next to each other. And I realized I was going to fail that battle immediately. Patience was out the window. I was angry right away. And yes, it's always driving. I'm sorry, guys. I know I have a problem. I'm trying to deal with it. So today we're actually going to study about the fall of Assyria. So Nineveh is the capital city. We're reading about this in Nahum. And it's actually, it's in chapter 2, the verses go together. They're very connected. And so we're going to study a little bit differently. Normally what I do is as we're walking through a passage, we'll walk through a lot of application as we're going through each passage. But to make sure I do this in correct timing, I think I have it down pretty well. To get through all these verses, I want us to do a little bit differently. We're going to study straight through and see exactly the picture that Nahum is painting in chapter 2. And then we're going to see the application of how that applies to us at the very, very end. Because in the middle of this, so verses 3 through 10, it's a very specific scene of Nahum, almost as if he can see himself. He's painting these 8 different scenes of the destruction of the city of Nineveh in particular. And so we're going to be going through that. So if you'll turn with me to Nahum chapter 2, we're going to be doing verses 1 through 13. And so the title of this one is, Behold, I Am Against You. So Nahum chapter 2 opens up in verse 1 with, The scatterer has come against you. Man the ramparts, watch the road, dress for battle, collect all your strength. Okay, I want to make sure we got the context here again. So we studied Jonah first because we got to see the city of Nineveh. This unwilling prophet comes in, right? Jonah walks in and he wants to come in and actually he tries not to, right? Originally he says, I don't want to go there. So he runs away from God because he does not want to go and teach or prophesy to the city of Nineveh. And we see at the end of the book, the reason why is he says, because God, I knew you would forgive them, and I don't want them to have forgiveness, right? He wanted God's mercy for himself, but he wanted God's justice on others. And we got to see that that's not the way we're supposed to live, right? We're supposed to desire mercy for other people, even people that we don't think deserve it, because the fact is, none of us deserve God's mercy. So we're thankful for it every time we receive it, and we should be thankful for it when other people receive it. And we got to celebrate with the city of Nineveh who all repented of their evil. And we see this massive group of people place belief in God. And this was incredible. And this is a celebration of the city of Nineveh right there, because this is a city that was very awful, that repented and sat in repentance, and then God relented of what judgment he is bringing to them. Then you get to see the polar opposite. 100 years later, Nahum writes to the city of Nineveh again, and they have deeply rooted themselves in evil. And Nahum is telling them, you will be destroyed. And that's the ending of chapter 1. It says, God says, I will destroy Assyria for its evil. And now we're going to see how that plays out. Because the thing is, the difference in the two times that we're studying the city is in the first one, they accepted God's message and said, you know what, God, you're right, I am evil. I am doing wrong. I am doing bad things. I can't forgive myself. The only hope I have is that maybe you could forgive me. And then this time, the Assyrian people, the people of the city of Nineveh, don't care that God calls what they're doing evil. Because they say, we don't care. We're doing what we want. So God does bring this destruction. So he says in this one, this chapter focuses on the future fall of Assyria as if it were happening right in front of Nahum. So the way this one's taught, it's almost like Nahum is getting to see the battle that is the downfall of the city of Nineveh. He has to see it just with his own eyes. And he walks us through seeing its destruction. But the thing is, do you know how long it takes from the time of Nahum writing this to the time that the Meso-Babylonians actually come in and overthrow the Assyrian Empire? It's 40 years later. Does God always operate on the time frame that we want him to? Again, I said I wouldn't give applications throughout, but I'm probably going to have to do it some because it's just in here and I have to make these points. But man, I struggle with that. Anybody else struggle with that? Anybody else, have you told God, hey God, I know you have a time frame, but let me give you some suggestions on how it could be better? I have things that I think, man, God, this should happen in this way or this time, and sometimes that's just not how he works. Does God have a better plan than I do? Yes, every single time. For the nation of Judah, who was under the oppression of Assyria, do you think they wanted Nahum's prophecy to come true tomorrow? Of course they did. But God's timing was for it to happen 40 years later. And there's a reason for it that we're going to understand in a minute. It's because God needed the people of Judah, his people, to have their faith in him, not in themselves. If it happened immediately, they'd just be like, oh, well, it just kind of finally happened. It was there. They needed to trust that God would accomplish what he said he would accomplish, even if it wasn't right away. So this doesn't happen for 40 years. Nahum begins with a call for the empire as a whole to prepare for an attack. So this opened up with, hey, Assyria, get yourselves ready. The scatterer has come, so do everything you can to defend yourselves. And the Assyrians are going to attempt to fight, right? They're going to try to defend themselves, but it's useless. God has already shown to Nahum that despite the military power of Assyria, this attack by the Medo-Babylonians on them will succeed. So 40 years later, the Medo-Babylonians do come in. I'll probably shorten that to the Babylonians just because that's the time period of Babylon. There's different groups of Babylonians that existed through history. But they do come back in, and they do destroy Assyria. Wipe them out. The empire is gone. And Nahum saw it and knows it's going to happen. So he's saying, hey, prepare yourselves. Man your battle stations. Get where you can to defend yourself. Do what you can, but in the end, it doesn't matter because God is going to win any battle he takes on. For the Lord is restoring the majesty of Jacob as the majesty of Israel. For plunderers have plundered them and ruined their branches. So Nahum is so confident that God is going to do what he's going to do. He's so confident that God is going to destroy Assyria that he gives this confidence to the people of Judah. He says, hey, you need to have hope in God because you are going to face salvation from the Assyrians when God brings judgment to them. They're going to benefit from the judgment of Assyria. Nahum is building on what he already said in chapter 1, where he said that God was going to liberate them from his covenant discipline and from the Assyrian oppression, right? So God had already said that in chapter 1. He said, I'm going to stop my discipline of you, because his judgment was, Israel had sinned, and so that's part of where the Assyrian army was allowed to come in and oppress the people of Israel, to take over the nation of Israel and oppress continually the nation of Judah. God allowed it because it was judgment. But then the people repented, and we see that God lifts this judgment, and not only does he stop his judgment of his discipline of his people, he says he's going to liberate them from the oppression of the Assyrian people. Restoring Jacob's majesty could mean the restoration of Judah's sovereignty over her territory, right? So it could just mean that Judah and Israel are going to be sovereign nations again, and it means that they're going to actually control their people, their territory, their stuff without somebody either owning the property that they're on or telling them, hey, you have to pay us to live there. You have to send your people to be soldiers in our wars. They might just be a sovereign nation again. Or it could mean a change in Judah and her fortunes, similar to the change that we see in the story of Jacob when he wrestles with God. So Jacob, the great deceiver, right? He's one, man, as far as the original patriarchs of the nation of Israel, it's wild because he's where the nation gets its name, but his story doesn't look like a protagonist good guy for most of the story, right? He lies nonstop to get his way. He deceives everyone. He's not the person we would have picked to be the leader, but he is who God picked. And then there comes a moment where he's about to come face to face with some of his choices, right? One of the first people he deceived was his brother, right? He tricked his brother out of his birthright and out of his inheritance, right? Tricked him out of it. And he's about to come face to face with his brother and what he believes will be an army of men coming to kill him. And so he stays up all night the night before, and he's struggling. And God shows up, and when God shows up, you would think that the answer, Jacob, the one who's been deceiving, he'd be like, okay, I guess I need to because he has a moment of faith before this where he places his faith in God. He truly does understand who God is, but he hasn't changed yet. So what does he do? God shows up and he's like, hey, God, let's wrestle. Anybody think they want to get in a fight with God physically? That sounds like a no-win situation, right? Jacob, inside of this, what he's wrestling for is he wants God to bless him. He's like, I can't go forward. I can't face my brother without your blessing, because if you don't bless me, I'm dead. Inside of this time, this is a fascinating part to this. In this wrestling with God, one of the things that God does, he touches Jacob's hip. Just by touching it, he gives him a permanent dislocation, a permanent injury where he has a limp for the rest of his life. But God then changes his name and does bless him, and he's named Israel, and then we see the nation of Israel that comes after him. One of the things that I've heard or read about recently of somebody saying why God did this to Jacob and his hip is because one of Jacob's main methods of dealing with conflict and not getting his way was running away, right? Once he had stolen his birthright, he ran away from Esau. Once he had gotten what he wanted out of Laban, even though there's some conflict there, he ran away. He, in his natural self, with his deception and his cowardice and who he was, would have run away from Esau again. And God took away that ability to run away ever again. Jacob became Israel, who was a person who had to go forward and face the conflicts that were in front of him and face the struggles he had. And God blessed him for it. I believe that this could be a part of the view that we're seeing, that the people of Israel had come before God in belief, in faith, and also just wrestling and saying, God, we're determined to get your blessing back because we're suffering so much and we don't want to. There is repentance for our sin. There is sorrow and contrition before you. We want your blessing back in our lives. I think both are in view. I think that if you eliminate Assyria, of course, Judah is going to have a sovereign territory again. But while a spiritual change fits this context really well, because it's a development that began with God's ending of his punishment for Judah's sin in Nahum 1:12, and included Judah's thankful celebration for God's deliverance in chapter 1, verse 15. Both meanings encourage Judah to continue trusting God and trust on her dependence upon him for spiritual and political well-being. So what Judah is being told here is, yes, you can have confidence. Place your faith in God. He is going to restore you. He's going to save you. He's got you covered. And it's not something you're going to do for yourself. You're not going to fight Assyria and win. You're not going to all of a sudden get strong enough to go. We're not going to give you a superhero. God's going to take care of you, and you just have to trust him for that. You have to trust him for your spiritual well-being. You have to trust him for your, as a nation, your political well-being. Trust him for all of your well-being. Let's continue. The shield of his mighty men is red. His soldiers are clothed in scarlet. The chariots come with flashing metal on the day he musters them. The cypress spears are brandished. Okay, so this is where we zoom in on the city of Nineveh, and we have 8 scenes in a row where Nahum is just going to show us what this destruction of the city of Nineveh looks like. So we get 8 scenes in a row of seeing. First, it's almost as if Nahum is there, getting to watch this battle unfold, and he just tells us, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's almost like he's holding a picture saying, this picture is of these men that show up with wearing all this red and with all their incredible weapons. So this verse is the first scene. It focuses on the approaching army under the control of the scatterer. Its expensive clothing, flashing chariots, and brandished spears show that it is well prepared and equipped for the attack. So what we're showing, it's almost like, again, Nahum's holding up a picture saying, this is the military, this is the army, this is the soldiers that are coming to attack Nineveh right now, even though it happens 40 years later. This is them. It would be like me showing you, if we're seeing the same picture of Nahum, imagine me holding up a picture of all the Navy SEALs, all teams of them. And I said, hey, this group, see them, see how they're what they wear, see what they have, see their weapons, see their stuff. They're going to come and storm your house later, so defend yourself. Anybody think they can win? Defend your house against all Navy SEALs? I couldn't defend myself against one Navy SEAL, right? It's not possible. So Nahum's, the first thing he shows them is, this is the military coming against you. The chariots race madly through the streets. They rush to and fro through the squares. They gleam like torches. They dart like lightning. This is the second scene, okay? So the first one shows just the military itself setting itself up and being prepared to attack. The very next scene is something that happens later, and it's almost like he's holding up a picture, and you get to see these chariots racing through the streets of Nineveh, just going all over the place. This verse describes the movement of the attackers' chariots, focusing on their speed as they attack. Sennacherib, which is the king of Assyria during this time, he had spent some time broadening the streets of Nineveh prior to this. So he wanted them wider, and he made sure the gates were made bigger as well. They're made wide enough for a chariot that's up to 6.5 feet wide to go through. The reason why he did this was he wanted to show off his own military power. He wanted to be able to race his chariots around the city of Nineveh to show the Ninevites, look how powerful I am. I, your king, have made us so strong that these are our chariots. This is how tough we are. We dare anybody to come in here and attack us. So this scene is happening within the city. It's inside Nineveh. And what the amazing irony is that the king of Assyria had widened his streets and made bigger gates so that he could show off his power. And the irony is now what we're seeing is it's the enemy's chariots that are racing around inside of the very city of Nineveh. He remembers his officers. They stumble as they go. They hasten to the wall. The siege tower is set up. Okay, so this is the third scene that we get to see, right? Next picture is the enemy is already present in Nineveh, okay? And so we are shifting over to look at the Assyrians that they're trying to defend themselves. So the person who remembers his officers is the king, right? He remembers he has these officers. So the king himself is in Nineveh to protect against this assault against the city. So this shows you how bad this is. This means that probably the rest of Assyria has already fallen. The king is in the last possible stronghold, which is the great city of Nineveh, and he's trying to defend the rest of his people in their last stand against this attacker. The image of Assyrian officers stumbling as they walk again. So it's like the king is bewildered. He's like he doesn't even know what to do. The siege tower's already up. The people they're racing around in the streets. They're already breaching everywhere. They're coming in, and the king's like, "Oh, I have officers. I have people. I need to tell them to go do stuff." And he's giving the orders. Hey, make sure we got people fighting and doing whatever. And it says that the officers just stumble as they go. They're trying to walk fast, but they're just kind of tripping over themselves to try to get to wherever they can. In the state of panic they're in, they can't even walk correctly. This is supposed to be a contrast for us. So you have the Assyrian defenders, just the officers themselves, they're stumbling as they go, trying to get to the place where they can defend the city, versus the chariots were racing like lightning around the city. And it seemed like they had no problem continuing to attack Assyria and especially Nineveh. So what that reminds me of, this stumbling as they get to where they go. Anybody ever have a dream where you're being chased and you can't run? Anybody? Some of you don't have anxiety, and it's not fair. That's a very common anxiety dream, just so you know. So what it is, sometimes you know what's chasing you, sometimes you don't, but you'll have something that's coming after you know it, and you can't run. You might be able to move a little bit, but you're walking like this, even though you know the thing is coming for you. And that's the whole dream. And then you wake up and you're like, why did I dream that? And you don't know. But that's what it reminds me of. When I look at this, I'm seeing these people that are just stumbling and trying to just get somewhere to do something. They just know it's hopeless. These Assyrian defenders know, like the officers are watching it going, who cares if we make it to where the soldiers are? We've already lost. The river gates are opened. The palace melts away. Its mistress is stripped. She is carried off. Her slave girls lamenting, moaning like doves, and beating their breasts. Okay, so we're going to walk through a couple of things here. This is two different scenes. So the ineffective and late defense of Nineveh disappears after it's mentioned in verse 5. So the remaining scenes predict the fall of the city. So verse 6, the top part of this, is the fourth scene. And so what we're seeing is the river gates are open and the palace melts away. That's verse 6. So that's a scene. So it's almost like he holds up a picture, Nahum saying, look at this. And showing the river gates being opened and the palace just being destroyed. So that describes the opening of the river gates and the collapse of the palace. So there's a river on the east of the city of Nineveh, a few miles away. And they had a canal dug towards the city, and that's what brought water to the city of Nineveh. So this canal brought the water from the river Kosor to Nineveh, and the water would go in through an eastern gate of the city, and then it would go out of the city through a western gate. So it just kind of flowed through. That's where they get their fresh water. And Sennacherib, the king of Assyria during this time, he had built sluice gates all upstream on the eastern side, which is where you build a wall and have a little gate you can shut down so you can control the amount of water that can flow through this canal to get into the city. And that's to make sure it didn't flood. So if the river got too high, it wouldn't flood the city as the water's going through it. So you had some control of how much water flow went in. So when it says that the river gates are opened, it gives us a little bit of room to decide, to figure out, and we have to kind of interpret what may have happened as they attacked the city. One of the things they may have done is they may have stopped up water at the farthest away from the source of the river, and then stopped all these gates up, collecting as much water as they could in each of these rounds of the canal, stopping up as much water as they could, and then all of a sudden release all of them at once to have a massive amount of water come through and damage and flood part of the city as they're taking over. That could have been one of the ways they did it. Another thing that could have happened is after the Babylonians had won, what they may have done is allowed the water to come up and flood some of the city to seal its destruction. And you might say, well, why would they do that? Because 70 years before the fall of the Assyrians, they had done exactly that to the Babylonians. After they conquered the Babylonians, they flooded their city after it was already destroyed to say, now we've sealed your destruction, it's done. So that's possibly what happened here. The fifth scene, which is in verse 7, it prophesies the capture of the statue of the patron goddess of Assyria, which is Ishtar. So in Assyrian writing, Ishtar is known as the Lady of Nineveh. And so what we see is that she's been captured. Her statue has been captured and taken away. The reason we know that this is what it's talking about is the verb that's translated as stripped. It always involves a physical object in the other context where we see it used. You can see it used in Genesis 28:12 and Judges 9:6. So we see the Lady of Nineveh, which is the statue of Ishtar, being taken away. This practice of taking a God's statue into exile is extremely common during this time. It would be a way to show that you truly defeated a city or a group of people. If you could take the statue of their God and remove it from their city and take it and do whatever you want with it, that means you're more powerful than their God itself. It would show what the stripping and carrying away of the image would confirm that the goddess was powerless to defend her residence and chosen city. The laments of her people, the laments of her temple personnel also echo those of other ancient Near Eastern texts in which a deity statue is captured by the enemy and carried away. So the Babylonians come in, they destroy the city, whether they use a flood to help their attack or they flood it after they're done. They're showing Assyria is finished. And they make sure to finish it by taking down the statue of the Lady of Nineveh, the statue of Ishtar. And they take her down and they're like, yeah, look how powerful your goddess is now. We'll take her away from you. Nineveh is like a pool whose waters run away. Halt, halt, they cry, but no one turns back. All right, so this is the 16th. So after we've seen these water gates, and we see this picture that he holds up of, here's the statue of Ishtar being pulled down and hauled away, and the Babylonians cheering as they've conquered not only Nineveh, but also their goddess. Your next scene is you're seeing the soldiers run away in panic. They're just trying to escape this chaos. And Nahum is showing them, saying, look, this is what your people are going to be doing. They're going to be running away from battle. They're overcome with fear and they leave their posts, ignoring their superiors' calls to remain and defend the city. What's wild is the Assyrian leaders shouting out, halt, halt, is the only time we hear the Assyrian voice spoken inside of this whole book. So we've not heard them speak throughout this whole book, and this is the only time that they speak. And it's the only time they speak, it's in a desperate plea to stop their people from running away and come back to fight a battle that they cannot win. So this makes it clear, Nineveh has fallen. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. There is no end of the treasure or wealth of all precious things. So then we shift. He holds up another picture. The seventh scene also uses a repeated command. Plunder, plunder, to depict the other side of the event that was seen in verse 8, with the defenseless city now being looted by the Babylonian army. So it's showing this next picture. So the first one, the picture before was the defenders, the Assyrian soldiers just running away, while the commanders, the officers are saying, no, halt, stop, you can't run away, come back, and they're just running away anyways. And then it's back to the Babylonians as they're saying, there's not anybody here to even fight anymore. Go and take everything. Taking treasure from Nineveh is significant because of the immense amount of wealth that was collected inside of the treasuries here. But you have to remember how they got so rich. How did they become so wealthy and so great of a city? Because they would go out and conquer nations, just taking over, turning their people into slaves and taking all of their stuff. And the nations that they didn't completely conquer, like Judah, they became vassal states, and they would say, hey, to exist, to live, to just simply be a people any longer, from now on, you're paying us this much money every single month. And anytime we go to war, your people are going to be soldiers on the front line, and you're going to go out and conquer people for us so we can get richer and richer and richer. And they had done this for a long time. They had lots of treasure. And so the Babylonians, they're going in, they're like, there's no end to treasure. Look at all this stuff. So while the scene before showed the soldiers running away and the officers just begging for them to stay and fight, you see the Babylonians saying, plunder, take it all. Desolate, desolation and ruin. Hearts melt and knees tremble. Anguish is in all loins. All faces grow pale. So this is the final scene. This is the eighth one, the final scene of the prophecy of Nineveh. It's almost like Nahum's holding up this picture of a people who are just completely in ruin. They've lost everything. And he's showing their faces and their actions. It envisions the result of the attack in three terms whose similar sounds in Hebrew further emphasize this awful, sudden, and complete fall of Nineveh. Desolate, desolation, and ruin. The summary of the city's fall is followed by a summary of the reactions of the inhabitants to defeat. So hearts melting and anguish in all loins describes the internal emotional effects that this event had on the Ninevites. Their hearts were melting, and there was anguish in all their loins. They were broken. Internally, emotionally, they were destroyed. So their knees were trembling, their faces were going pale. That was the outward signs of the dismay and despair of the defeated Assyrians. So it's almost like this picture. It shows a people where you can tell by the picture, maybe it's even like a video if we're trying to see it, of a people where you can see in their face and in their shaking knees. You can see in the way that their emotions are on their face, you can see they are in complete despair. Where is the lion's den, the feeding place of the young lions? Where are the lion, where the lion and the lioness went, where his cubs were, with none to disturb? All right, so we're in the last part of this. The last three verses describe a God-centered response for the fall of Assyria. So this is the opposite. This response is the opposite of the one in verse 10. And hints at a joy that's going to summarize when we finish this book in chapter 3. So this section focuses on the Assyrian king as the representative of the empire and adopts, with great irony, his self-description as a lion who violently defeats his enemies. Okay, so we get this from reading Assyrian texts. So in the Assyrian annals, you can read multiple kings who referred to themselves in certain phrases as lions. Lots of them. I'll give you a few of them. One called himself a potent lion. Another called himself a wild lion who is lordly with frightfulness. One said he raged like a lion against his enemies. These are all the things the kings would say about themselves, right? So the Assyrian kings were known for saying, I am a lion. You can't stop me. So this verse applies this image to Assyria by sketching a picture of a large pride of lions made up of the dominant male, his lionesses, and several generations of young, emphasizing the security of this large pride in and around its den. So this picture is saying Assyria is this lion, right, with all the lionesses and all the cubs. It's defended, it's strong. Look, it's powerful Assyria. The lion tore enough for its cub and strangled prey for his lionesses. He filled his caves with prey and his dens with torn flesh. So this depicts the lion's violent existence with a wide variety of terms used for hunting activities and targets, right? It says that he strangled and he killed, tore enough off. He killed in order to protect his pride. So this is talking about Assyria again, right? So this is the lion, and this is true in history, right? Assyria was strong. It did go out and devour and take and plunder and just controlled its territory. And there was none who could fight against Assyria until God said it's done. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. And I will burn your chariots in smoke, and the sword shall devour your young lions. I will cut off your prey from the earth, and the voice of your messengers shall no longer be heard. This image of this strong pride of lions, which accurately reflects this Assyrian ideology, is radically undone by the Lord's response. See, no matter how powerful the Assyrian king was, no matter how strong of a lion he believed himself to be, God said, behold, I am against you. I will burn your chariots. The king believed there was no military force on earth that could fight against him. And for a time, that might have been naturally true, but the fact is, God said, because of your evil, I'm judging you, and you're nothing compared to me. You're not a lion when I show up. Much like his words to the Assyrian king in chapter 1, verse 14, here the Lord speaks directly to the Assyrian ruler and commits to destroying him and his empire because of the idolatrous and immoral violence by which it pursued material wealth and glory. God solemnly promises to destroy the empire's army and its diplomats responding for negotiating treaties, delivering the king's edicts to the client states. Here's the thing we got to see with this. The people of Assyria had a different god, and Ishtar was just a picture, right? Ishtar was a statue. They called her their goddess, but I've said this, I believe this fully. I think that you either worship the one true God or you worship yourself, really. The people of Assyria, especially the Assyrian king, he worshiped himself. He thought the world was there to serve him. Make me stronger, make me powerful, give me more glory, and make me rich because that's what I deserve. He chased this God to its end, and even when confronted with, hey, Nahum's message, God is going to destroy you. This king did not care. The people did not care. They still continued to worship themselves. And they found judgment at the end of that. Now, this is happening at a time, right? And we know these events are historical. We can see, as we look in history, that 40 years after the writing of this book, we can see where Babylon came back, next rendition of Babylon, and defeated completely the Assyrian Empire. So we know that this is there. The people of Israel and people of Judah had to wait 40 years for this to happen. But do you know what they were supposed to do during that 40 years? Hope in God and trust for him. And then also they were supposed to have their hope just concreted into solid faith as they saw the Assyrian Empire being toppled. And I mean, think about it, 40 years later. Think of God telling us something like that now, and then we have to wait 40 years. And so in 40 years, I'd be telling my grandchildren, God said he was going to do that. This is God's doing. And they're supposed to concrete in them this faith to remain faithful to God. Keep your hope in him because he keeps his promises. But this is also supposed to have us look at something else. Just like the people of Judah, we are waiting on God's justice in so many areas of our life, right? There are places where you're waiting, you're saying, God, this in my life at this point, this is wrong, this isn't right, this isn't fair if you're a middle child. We're saying, God, where are you? Why have you not done something in this? And the answer is the same as the people of Judah. We're waiting on his justice. Just like them, we are not responsible for bringing that justice to others. Some of us can struggle with wanting to make sure we give people the discipline that we think God should give them. And so we'll be the ones to bring vengeance because we know God's mad at it, so I'll just take care of it for you, God. He doesn't tell us to do that. He tells us to leave vengeance to him and be patient and trust in him. And we know that ultimately, again, what this points to, this is a small temporal piece of God's judgment. Ultimately, God's judgment is going to be completely fulfilled when Jesus returns. And the lost world will be just as defenseless against him as Assyria was in this passage, right? Jesus is going to come back and bring judgment against all sin and justice to all wrong that's been done. So I want you guys to bow your heads and close your eyes as we think about that. So the picture I'm wanting us to see right now is the return of Christ. As he does, it's going to be a terrifying day because this is God's wrath brought to earth because of sin. And I want us to understand something. There is hope, but there's only one hope to escape God's judgment. And that is placing your faith in Christ alone for salvation from your sin. When your faith is in him, then he has taken every single sin you ever have committed and ever will commit onto the cross, and he paid the penalty for it already. So if you've never done that, I beg you today to place your faith in Jesus for salvation. The second thing this should cause us to do is we understand we only have a limited time to bring that message of salvation to the people that God has placed in our lives. Maybe there's people we haven't shared that message with because we're nervous about how the conversation will go. We're just scared of how awkward it might be. I want to ask you to ask God to give you faith and courage to have that conversation with your friend, your family member this week. Maybe, though, there's some people that you haven't shared with because, frankly, they're your enemy. You couldn't care less about that person. But that's a person that still needs to hear the story of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's a person that doesn't deserve his mercy any more or any less than you. And maybe if that person heard the story of the message of Jesus Christ from you, they would place their faith in him. So I want to ask you to think, who has God placed in my life that I need to bring the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to? Lord, I pray that as we study this chapter of the fall of Nineveh, God, where you say you're going to do something, we can trust that you're going to do it. That there is no force on earth that's stronger than you. And Lord, while we got to see that there was a period in time where this evil nation did face judgment because of its awful sin, because of its cruel treatment of others, we know, God, that ultimately all sin is going to be judged. That your wrath is going to burn against it when your son returns. God, I pray you help us to understand that there's a limited time to bring your gospel to the world. Please, Lord, give us a conviction to be urgent with bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to the world around us. In your name I pray. And please stand and respond however God leads.